today is going to be around battling bots. And this is the activities that defenders do. So if anybody saw Dan Wood's talk this morning, this is going to be a little bit of overlap. There's a little bit of a Venn diagram, but where he was focused on a lot of the automation and just sort of talking through some of those challenges, we're actually going to show how to build one. We're going to talk about how there's good bots, although we did briefly talk about that. And we're going to tell a story through the eyes of a character that I had an AI create for me. So, just a disclaimer, since I'm sure everybody's wondering. So, the only use of AI in this presentation was to create Dottie the character, Dottie the defender. Pretty sure no actual AI models were harmed during the making of this talk, so we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, so we're going to start by meeting Dottie the defender. Oh, by the way, sorry, one more thing before we get started. There's a QR code at the end of this that has a resource pack. We're not at DEF CON, it's not going to hurt you. It goes to my link stack where you'll be able to download these slides plus a markdown file that has code snippets, links, further research, all kinds of stuff. So I always like to leave behind when I do presentations like this. So, okay, on to Dottie. So the story we're going to tell this through is called Dottie the Defender versus the Swarm, right? So, you can imagine for a second that you are a defender in a company and you jolt up right out of bed, let's call it 3 in the morning, whatever it is. And her phone is buzzing like a swarm of bees, it's buzzing off like about to fall off the nightstand, it's buzzing so much. But it's not bees, it's bots. Bots are causing alarms to go off. Legitimate customers are not able to use this site. Now for the purposes of this story, let's assume that this is a transactional business, meaning that Dottie is defending a site that makes money when transactions occur. So we want it to be up, but if legitimate customers can't get to it or customers can't get to it because it's overloaded, the types of transactions may not be the ones that they want, but it's going to be sort of like making money based on the transaction. So her phone buzzing changes. Now the caller ID says CEO, so we're assuming it's actually the CEO, not just caller ID spoofing. She says hello. So let's talk about what bots are in the case that we're talking about here. So in this case, I'm really focusing on the type of code that's going to mimic what a human would do, what the carbon-based water bags here would do when they're interacting with properties, whether it's an app, an API, or a website. Okay? It could just be some type of automation, right? It doesn't have to be something super fancy, although there are some very fancy ones. They're generally snippets of code that do one of two things, right? They're going to look for information to appear and then take an action, or they're going to have previously gained information and wait for maybe a time-based thing and then take an action. So it's something that's polling and looking, or something that knows, hey, this is what I'm supposed to do, and I'm going to poll and do what I need to do. And actually, we use them all the time. Like if you used any site to travel to get here, like Kayak or Google Flights or something like that, you used one, and you maybe didn't even know it. So they come in all forms. So in their most basic form, it could just be a Lambda function that waits for a condition to change. And Lambda functions, for those that don't know, they are based in AWS. They're limited to AWS, but I think we sort of now use the more broadly term as a piece of code sitting out there that's doing some action at a predetermined time, or you're calling it as a microservice. So, as an example, let's say that the day in kindergarten when you learned the Days of the Week song, that you were absent. You had the flu, you had COVID, you had something. You were not there for the Days of the Week song. And so you don't really know your days of the week, but you do know about this one day, and the day's Friday, and you remember it because cool things happen on that day. Everybody's happy on Friday. You leave early. You get to go to happy hour, and then you get 2 days where you don't work, right? So you still don't know what those days are, but you want to know when Friday is, right? So you write a Lambda function, which, yes, I know it's shocking that you wouldn't know the days of the week, but you would be able to write a Lambda function. You write a Lambda function to check, is it Friday.org? Yes, that's a real site. I'll show you what it looks like. You schedule it once per day, like 8 o'clock, right? Because you don't want to be too early. You don't have to wake you up from whatever nice dream you're having, but you still want to be able to enjoy the morning knowing that, hey, it's Friday, right? And when the condition is yes, you want it to text your cell phone and say, hey, it's Friday. All right, and this is what it looks like. So today, it's not Friday, it's Thursday. If you go check the site tomorrow, it'll say yes. So you know your days of the week, so you don't need to have this. But that's an example of what a simple bot might do. Okay, now is Dottie starting to think about, okay, bots, I'm starting to learn maybe there's good bots and bad bots, but are there other ways that I could sort of figure out what could be happening, right? So A more complex and perhaps useful example of one, let's say you're trying to find monthly expenses that you forgot about, all these subscriptions that you didn't realize you were paying for. So you sign up with Truebill. There's a ton of these, by the way, and I don't work for Truebill, obviously, and I don't have stock in whoever owns them now. But there are a bunch that are like this, right? And so they're going to analyze the transactions, and they're looking for recurrent bills. And then when that happens, when it sees one, it's going to alert you and say, hey, by the way, I found a recurrent bill. You have a new subscription. You're getting hit every month for whatever service, whatever coffee service that you have coming to you, and it's hitting you, for $27 a month. So it was definitely more useful. But was it more complex? I mean, in some respects, right, it's still probably just using screen scraping to pull data. And that's something where, we have a couple different ways that we can pull data. We can use APIs or we can screen scrape. Screen scrape's really the lowest denominator. If anybody has been in the industry long enough where you've worked with companies that have tried to take mainframe apps and make them web friendly, they're using screen scraping to do that as well. Same deal. So when certain data is present, we take a predefined action. We found a pattern, and we hand it off to a human. So it's really not that complex because we didn't do anything other than alert and find this pattern and then tell somebody about it. Like, we didn't do anything about it. Okay, so let's talk about some more complex examples. I understand that a couple of these might be a little bit dated, but they're very good examples, I think. Buying PS5s or a graphics card. Because the supply is low, it drops at seemingly random times, and the demand is very high. There's actually an article I linked to in the, not the show notes, the resource pack at the end, we call them show notes, that talks about the iPhone launch had this problem. And if anybody was trying to buy one at 7 or 8 o'clock, whatever it was, you probably noticed this problem, that there were bots that were trying to buy up the inventory. The next one is like buying tickets for concerts. This one cracks me up because Ticketmaster and AXS love this. If you work at Ticketmaster, AXS, or Live Nation, I'm sorry, but you're gonna have to listen to this, right? They love it. Why do they love it? Because the tickets sell out. They get their fees, they don't care, and the best part is the ticket brokers, by the way, when I grew up, they were called scalpers, but the ticket brokers will now put those tickets back on the website for secondary market sales, which, by the way, those guys take a cut of the sale of that. So they have no problem allowing brokers to sign up dozens of accounts and allowing them to buy tickets when they launch. So, and if you listen to Dan's talk, he talked a little bit about, sneakers would be another one, just buying sneakers and then reselling them and making a lot of money doing that. Okay. You could also use it for testing web/programmatic interfaces for functionality. So if you were, when I was responsible at the bank for releasing applications, I had to make sure that when the code went public that somebody could still check their balance, pay their bills, add a payee, change their phone number. Unfortunately, we did it all by hand, which means that a human was awake at 3 in the morning trying to race through their testing procedure before the window closed on that data center. It always closed before they finished, by the way. And we were never able to really programatize that. And I was trying to get budget to do that where we could use robots to do that, program what the interface is supposed to do, walk through it. Modern testing applications, and I don't know how modern you want to call Rails. I still use it for one of my applications, but using RSpec to write all your testing procedures and having it go through and interactively click buttons and see what responses come back. The next one is searching for trends in markets and making buy-sell recommendations. There's a tool that I'm going to show you later that does exactly this, right? So if you're the kind of person that doesn't really care about sentiment or revenue, you just look at the patterns and see, that's like the double eagle humpback thing, so I'm going to buy when it hits this number. Like whatever the thing is, I don't know what these patterns are. It's not what I do. I don't know how to do any of that stuff. But if you do, and you want to take advantage of those, that's another example. The last one that I have on this is chatbots. I think we're pretty familiar with chatbots. I'm not talking about the generative AI. I'm talking about the thing that a lot of us now try to do so we don't have to pick up the phone to call and get tech support. Go on the chat, try to get them to pass you to a level 2, level 3, whatever the code word is that you can get back past the initial person. But some of the bots initially also now are taking action. So we built a proof of concept and a shopping experience where you interacted with the chat bot, and as you're interacting, it would create your account and build your profile out. so you didn't have to do a separate thing to do that. So that could be another example. So Dottie's going through these examples. She's trying to figure out, okay, here's a good baseline of stuff. And now I feel like I have this baseline. Now I can sort of go back and maybe think about how I'm going to attack this problem. So why do we need to know this? So almost everything has a digital component these days, right? And while you can use it for your own benefit, you can rest assured it will be used against you. And if you're like me, maybe you've discovered in your house something that was put on the network that had a digital interface that you didn't realize. Even with Bluetooth. Why is this thing talking Bluetooth all of a sudden? You can see it. So they're there, right? So I'm saying nearly all modern toys. Maybe it's an exaggeration, but maybe it's not, right? And the reason for this is, by the way, so just a side note, if you think back to maybe 15 years ago, and you think back to your Fitbit and how it had an interface that you messed with on the device. The devices that are smart these days that we see don't have that interface. What do they have instead? They have a mobile app. Why? Because it's so much easier to update a mobile app than it is to update the firmware on some device, which probably has a number of bad security vulnerabilities in it anyway. So that's why this trend is here, because it's way easier for us to build mobile apps to interface with these devices than it is to build interfaces on them. Okay. Not all bots are bad. Some of those I threw up there could be questionable. But there are some good ones, and as a defender, you need to understand how your business operates and know where those good bots exist. And we'll talk about a couple of those, but there are some good bots. An example would be in financial services where I came from. So bots and banks have this symbiotic relationship. If you've ever used a budgeting tool like Mint, or you've ever used something to like look at your transactions, even Truebill is a good example. Banks, for whatever reason, love inertia, and they don't want to invest in this type of stuff. But banks have the customers, and they have the bank charters. So the balances and the customers are there. The fintech folks are going to come in and add value on top of that. They bring the technology, whereas the banks just have the money. So as a defender, if you're in financial services, you definitely have to be aware of this, and there's going to be things like Plaid that you're going to hate, but you're going to have to let it come through. And then all the other aggregators, all these different financial tools and fintech, you're going to hate them because they're going to do things to your systems, but you're going to need to let them in. Because if it's not available, customer will move. So 3 examples I want to talk about. I talked about Mint already. My son is 18 and has grand plans of buying a new car, even though the car he has is perfectly fine. And so I said, buddy, I know you're working in the garage, working in the garage at Mercedes, but I don't know if you're making enough money yet to really think about that. Like, do you really want to spend money on a car right now with interest rates being where they are? Well, of course, he just sees, new cars and he wants it. So, all right, let's do this. Let's create a budget. You connect it to your bank account. You connect it to your credit card accounts. You set your budgets, does everything for you. Some APIs now, as we're getting into an open banking framework here in the US, but a lot of screen scraping as well. Spend tracking analysis, great tool. Next one, Empower. Used to be called Personal Capital. It's actually a really brilliant lead gen tool. So what you do is you take that 401k that you had at that one company that you left 10 years ago, and you put that in there. And then you put the current 401k, and then maybe you have a tiny investment account at E-Trade that you goof around with options and stuff that you're playing with. And it will basically track all your investments. How did you do against the market? They have their own products too. So it's this massive lead gen tool. They say, oh, look, you've amassed quite a bit of money in these accounts. How about you transfer it to us, and then we'll invest it for you. So I think that was pretty smart on them. The last one is one I kind of hit to earlier. It's called Composer.trade. So if you decide that you want to follow Nancy Pelosi's trading strategy, you can. You have your own strategy that you want to put in, based on certain market drops. If CPI is up or down, I want to buy or sell certain stocks or indexes, it'll do it for you. And it is a full brokerage account as well. So they have certain regulations. They're not the actual clearinghouse, but they work the same way. So you just build your strategies in there, and it works in the background. And hopefully you choose correctly, and that goes up and to the right, not down and to the right. Okay. So what about bad bots? Well, Dan talked a little bit about this, the cred stuffing. It's fairly common, and there's ways that we try to combat it, right? So at the bank, I didn't want bots touching that stuff. So we were pretty significantly, blocking anybody who was trying to do automation against our login pages. In the meantime, we're also making sure we don't tell the bot that they have gotten a validated account, right? We use the same method of, hey, if you want to reset, you should get an email. Or even if we knew the password was incorrect, the username and password was incorrect, we would still forward to the next screen and do something around like a challenge question and say, okay, hey, this doesn't match, you need to call or reset or whatever. There's some basic script kiddie stuff, and I'll show you some stuff, but there's also headless Chrome, which has a fingerprint that's almost indistinguishable from you and I browsing. So it's become very difficult for companies to be able to sort this stuff out. Some companies are good at it. Shape's good at it. Sorry, F5. Next one is the bots that store cred. So this is a bad behavior. I didn't want to say I broke this up into two ways. So bad actors and bad behaviors. Bad behaviors are going to be good-natured bots like somebody like a Plaid or a Mint or somebody else in the old days who tells you, oh, I don't store your credentials. Yeah, they do. Because how else are they going to keep that session alive without bugging you to continue to log in? Because sure, they can do keep alives for a period of time, then the bank's going to be like, will you please stop hitting my systems? That's enough, and they're going to pause it, and then everybody's account resets. So they're going to fix that by storing your credential and replaying it. So the proper way should be with OAuth and API calls, and that's where it's moving right now. So a good example, if you bank with Chase and you use Mint, you will see is now an OAuth connection that occurs, and you can revoke that token. So it's the proper way to do things. Why? Because I want to control what you have access to, and I want to put the power of removing that connection in the hands of the user in a way that doesn't force them to change their entire authentication strategy. Okay, so all that stuff, Dottie's learning all this stuff, so let's go back to Dottie for a second. So she has a knee-jerk reaction. She's learning, but she's also trying to stop the buzzing and stop the CEO who asks her to help. It's never an ask, right? Asks her to help solve this problem, and it's probably calling her every 5 minutes saying, is it solved, is it solved, is it solved? As all of us have probably been on that side of the phone, like if you stop calling me, I can work on solving it, but no, it's not done yet. So her first reaction was, stop the barrage of these bots that are hitting my sites. And how am I gonna do that? Well, the knee jerk is CAPTCHA, right? CAPTCHA's not great for a number of reasons. But she's like, this is all I have right now. I think I'm just gonna throw this out here and see what happens. So the alarms stop, but now transactions are going down as well. Transactions are not going through the system. Why? Because the user experience is terrible. Nobody wants to be picking fire hydrants or buses or spoke wheels. They want to get to what they're trying to do. Social media starts to light on fire in a real negative way. This is somewhat based on like a story from that I was dealing with. I wasn't Dottie in this case, and we said we're not doing CAPTCHA because we had the foresight to think through some of this. But social media lighting up, hey, things are down, things are broken. If it's a regulated entity, you're now going to start getting calls from the press and potentially a regulator, what's going on over there. So the bad alarms, they begin their crescendo now again because the bots pivoted. So this is one of those things when you get sophisticated actors that are looking to take advantage of systems, when you put something super basic like CAPTCHA up there, they know how to bypass that. And there is an article in the resource pack that shows how to do that. So you'll be able to see that. Okay, so she thought she got it right, didn't get it right, it's getting worse again. So as a defender, which is what I'm assuming most of us are, this all starts with a risk-based decision with management. So the way I describe this is if you're a boater or you like boats, and you go down, you're sitting up on the deck, everything's great, you go down into the salon and you look and you hear water sloshing around and you see water. That's generally bad on a boat, to see water where water is not supposed to be. The thing you're not going to do is go grab a bucket. The thing you're gonna do is figure out, where's the water coming from? Let me stop more water from coming in, then I'll worry about bailing the existing water out. So before you take an action, you need to talk to the suits. They need to be able to, you need to speak to them in a way they can understand, which can be difficult, but they need to make a risk decision on the treatment of the bots. How do I want to treat these bots that are coming into the site? There's risks on either side of this, by the way. If I say straight up block, there's risks to that. If I say allow it through, well, obviously we know what's going on right there. It's not great. So you may care, right? You may say, I want to make sure that a human is accessing certain functionality in my website, like transferring money. If I'm a bank, I really want to make sure that's the case because something called Regulation E means that I am responsible as the bank of any digital transactions that happen on the platform, which is why You can call your bank in a lot of cases when you've had certain types of fraud, and they are able to reverse it because they're ultimately responsible. And that's also why they put a lot more fraud controls and layers and stuff, because they want to make sure you actually are intending to do the thing you're trying to do. You may want to force all non-humans into an API so you can control it, have authenticated access to it, limit what they can do, make sure it's in a defined pathway that works. Also, your user creds might be inside the bot, and spoiler alert, they oftentimes are. So there's reasons why you may not care. If I'm a retailer and I have a drop of a new set of sneakers, graphics card, tickets, who cares if I sell it in 60 seconds? I win. Sweet, done. I just made a crap ton of money. I don't care who has them. Now I'm creating secondary markets and I may care about that, but as Dane even talked about, like, they don't. All they do is like, hey, I just sold all this stuff, this is great. So they may say publicly, oh, we don't want bots having our stuff. They don't care. Or you may want partners that you are working with that are adding value to your system. So this could, again, be like fintech. You've built a hardened website that has limited functionality, and you're not ready to expose an API because maybe you're not sophisticated enough to handle it, you don't know how to do it right, but you built this website and you want to force people through the website. So that could be a valid reason why you may not care, because you've already hardened the website and you don't want them to use APIs. So Dottie is in a little bit of a crisis mode right now. Right, her initial blocking, the capture thing, knee-jerk reaction, it was at the expense of customer experience. So it didn't work out quite the way that she was hoping it was going to work out. And the bots are back. And then ultimately, as she talked to the suits and explained what was going on, they didn't actually care. This is kind of along the lines of that retail thing. We don't actually care that they're there. We just don't want the system to shut down. We need to take a different approach. So they're okay to be there, don't want to overwhelm the systems. Okay, so she goes to, we're going to call it, I don't know, bot school, whatever you want to call it, but she's learning how they work. She knows that this is really this escalating, dangerous game of whack-a-mole. If you're just taking a move, they're going to take another move. You take a move, they're going to take another move. She might be able to build some of her own to automate parts of her job, so that's going to be useful for her. She wants to learn how to do that. And actually on the whack-a-mole thing, so the credential stuffing attack that I had to deal with at the bank, we had 1.5 million IPs hitting us, so they were falling below the threshold of our WAF. And it was overwhelming things. They were validating a bunch of accounts, and we were fraud locking these accounts and calling these customers to change their password. And as we deployed countermeasures, it changed the game, and then the countermeasures adopted the same way, where we were getting intel from one of the underground sites. The guy was selling this malware to go after us, and he finally said, I'm done. They've clearly got some mitigation strategy in place. I'm not updating this anymore. So I'm going to go somewhere else, right? So it's the whole, I don't have to be the fastest guy out of the camp when the bear shows up, but I can't be the slowest guy. So then Dottie says, okay, why don't I use this to augment my life too? So I'm waiting for the hottest new gadget. I don't wait for the email to drop. I go check the website when it's available. Now maybe I don't buy. There's somebody that I know some of you know, I'm not going to say who this person's name is, and they write bots. And they will write bots to get access to certain experiences. But he said, from an ethics perspective, he said, I don't let the bot buy it. I let it send me a push notification, and then I hop on like a normal person. So fine, I think that's fine and ethical. But some people just say, hey, buy it for me. What about airfares? I've never seen the Northern Lights. I want to see the Northern Lights. It's like prime time, like right about now. So I want to find a good deal. I don't want to pay $3,000 for my airfare. I'd like to pay like $400 round trip for my airfare. So I can deploy bots to help me find that airfare. Now, there's plenty out there right now. I don't have to write my own. But if I wanted to write my own specific airline that I wanted to go with, I could do that. This is a very edge case that actually was one of the examples that came up when I was researching this. If you need to get a list of products from your favorite Etsy store into a spreadsheet, well then maybe you'd want to use a bot to augment your life. And yes, there's sample code out there, and I was really shocked. I don't know what the use case is, but it's out there. So the detection is really the important part, because once you have the risk management discussion and you understand what the limits are and what management is wanting to put up with, you need to be able to figure out what is real bot and what is a human. And it can get really tricky with headless Chrome or headless Firefox, same thing. Like, it can get really, really tricky. They have a browser footprint that looks very similar. So there are some easy binary options. Most of these things are JavaScript-based, and they send telemetry. So they'll do things like they'll run some math problems, and based on the timing and the way that it answers, they'll be able to fingerprint the browser or the machine or both. So if the telemetry is missing, well, that's a pretty easy clue that, hey, this is not actually a human doing this, or they have JavaScript turned off, which I don't even know how you browse the web these days with JavaScript turned off. Like, everybody's got JavaScript on their sites. It's unusable. Emulated apps or browsers can still execute that JavaScript. So if you're trying to work with a mobile app that's accessing an API and you want to embed an SDK that is going to help you gather that telemetry and pass it onto an engine, remember that an emulator is going to do that exact same thing. Download the app, it's going to have all the information there. So the SDK has to be able to understand that this is an emulator versus an actual person. It's also useful to do things, gathering additional telemetry to understand, hey, this device that's interacting with me has logged in on 10 other accounts on my same site. That might be a problem. But the tooling is really critical, right? Because you don't want to shut out a customer, because that's how the social media storm starts. And you don't want to let in the bots and treat them like a customer, because you have different treatment based on management and what they've told you to do. So again, it starts with management. Maybe you don't monitor them, you don't care. Fine, bots are there. Go drink whiskey, don't care. Maybe you tolerate them. This is where Dottie is. Dottie's in the tolerate phase. She said, management says it's okay for them to be there. We just need to make sure that our actual customers are able to access the site. Okay. So we monitor, we shape traffic, we maybe make life more difficult for them, tar pit, whatever it is. And the last one is we block. We could drop completely. Does anybody, so this is like going way, way back. Does anybody know what HTTP 418 is? You know what 404 is, you know what 302 is. 418, it sends a message back that says, I'm a teapot. That's in the spec, you can look it up. So maybe you send, I'm a teapot. They'll be very confused for a minute there. But it's going to stop their action. They won't be able to go any farther. Okay. Oh, the other thing you can do, so this is like a difference between like financial services and retail. Financial services puts all the friction to your relationship up front. I have to know who you are. I have to make sure you're not money laundering, which, by the way, if you want to learn how to launder money, go work for a bank. They teach you how to do it because you have to detect it, right? But it's kind of a weird secret. It's like, hey, we're going to show you how to launder money. So all the friction is up front, and then they let you in the system. Retail is opposite. Retail is like, you're browsing the website, and they don't want to look in the eye. They're like, nope, not going to look at you until you put that credit card in there. Once your credit card is in there, they got you. But they also have chargeback risk. So they want to make sure that the card that was given to them has a good chance of settling and clearing, and not 60 days later having that charge come back after my goods or services have already left the building. So there is a path after the transaction occurs that you might do that. Retailers do that online. Okay. So Dottie's now going to pivot, right? So the CAPTCHA, she removes the CAPTCHA. It's like, this was clearly a bad idea. The good thing is she's learning from her mistake and saying, nope, I got to pull this off. This is not working. So then she added some treatment, rate limiting of traffic from known bot networks. This is not foolproof because, if you're one of the people that had the compromised cameras or the compromised routers or whatever, it looks like it's coming from a home user, you're still going to have some of that traffic that's in there. So hopefully your botnet that's attacking you and doing this is doing it from AWS, which, yes, that's where some of them comes from, or compromised hosts in another country. And then we want to block bots from performing transaction execution. So even if we sort of limit that traffic, once they get to the page where they want to do a transaction or do something, we say, no, we're not going to allow that to happen. So it's a multi-layered treatment. So what did Dottie learn? So first of all, collaboration on risk is imperative. I don't know if Gene Kranz actually said that. I know we're here in Houston, which is why I want to put this in here. But Ed Harris, as Gene Kranz, said this in the Apollo 13 movie. And it's one of my favorite things when people get into crisis mode is just, let's work the problem, people. Let's not make things worse by guessing. It's such a critical lesson. I think we tend to react and we don't think. We need to properly explain the outcomes with scenarios in plain business language so that the suits understand, if I do this, these are 4 likely outcomes that are going to happen. We had a phrase at work at the bank that ready, fire, aim. It can work. It's risky, but you have to be able to steer the ordnance. right? So cruise missiles, you don't get them in the air, it doesn't matter. I can steer the cruise missile, but if I've got a parabolic bullet, it goes one way. That's it. So I need to, if I'm only able to make that shot once, I have to spend a lot of time aiming, measure twice, cut once, then I can fire. But if I am able to pivot very rapidly, okay, fine. So she just wanted to stop the alarms, but what she did is she couldn't steer that. So it ended up backfiring and blowing up a little bit. Okay. So now let's jump into some examples. Again, there's going to be some code that's going to come up here. It's okay. You're going to get it in the resource pack at the end. So one example. During COVID, we were all bored. We said, hey, let's try to do some options trading, and we'll make a game out of it. So I built a little tool. It's working again. I needed a way to scrape options prices from Yahoo Finance. If you've ever played with like Google Sheets, there's a Yahoo Finance plugin where you can pull stock prices, but you can't pull option contracts. So I had to do a screen scraping bot that then turned into an API call to pull the information down. And it just kind of looks like that in the corner there. Yeah, so it's updated. I updated it last week. It's not broken, so that's nice. URL watch or web changes. So these leverage Python to look for changes. It gets tricky with a lot of CSS, and we're going to go into an example of this because this is one I still use today, every day. Oh, and one more. So there is a local restaurant. Anybody from the Dallas area up here? No? Okay. There's a local restaurant up in Denton called Osteria El Muro, and they have like 26 seats in the restaurant, and they open their reservations for 2 months at a time, and it sells out in like 3 minutes. This is a tiny place. And they use this thing called Talk, the reservation. If you try to get a reservation at the French Laundry, they also use Talk. So this bot, somebody made a bot on for Talk for getting reservations at the French Laundry. So you put your thing in there, and it does it, and it grabs it, and yes, it works. And because nobody codes anything by hand anymore, I adapted it to work for the restaurant in Denton, and yes, I got a reservation for a friend doing that, right? So, like the scariest thing any developer has is a blank sheet. You know, void main and curly braces, terrifying. Okay, now URL watch. So the whole point of URL watch is something is designed to monitor changes on websites. Now I'll tell you a story how I got in crossways with MasterCard. So back in the day, I ran a pretty large PCI practice at VeriSign. We had about 80 people at the peak. And the card brands would tell us, hey, we're not going to tell you when we change stuff. Just look at the website. Like, it's impossible with all the stuff that's on there to understand what changes. It's the equivalent of, hey, we've got a new end-user license agreement for you to sign. What changed? Don't worry about it. Just hit the accept thing. So to make a point, I was polling their site every hour. And then they found it, and they blocked me. And so I called over there, and I'm like, what's the deal? And I said, look, you can't be doing this. I said, you told us. You said that I was responsible for knowing stuff when you posted on the website because you won't proactively tell me. And they're like, okay, fine. Can you just make it like once a day? I said, yes. So I made it once a day. And then when I left the company, the guys that were still there, they were like, hey, what happened to our alerts? I'm like, I don't work here anymore. You're not getting my alerts anymore. All right. Pros, super simple. Really simple. I'm going to show you a config example. Really simple. You can deploy it anywhere. It's Python. Plenty of output options. You can do webhooks. I've got one webhooking into Slack, email. There's a bunch of different ways. It also will check for local file changes, which I think is pretty cool if you're running any sort of systems where you just need one directory to watch for changes on this thing. But complex web stuff really does confuse it. And here's the story around that. So, first, let me show you the config. So this is, again, I told you I run a Rails application, and yeah, you can judge me all you want for it. It's fine. But this is the code that will grab you changes to the Rails gem. When there's a new version that's posted, I get an email. It says, hey, we removed this version, and we added this version. I also use it on one of my local watering holes. They change their menu every month, and so I pull that too, and then I pull that back down, and they always get mad, like, how did you know the menu was changed? Like, I don't know. So now what can break it? So let me tell you what can break it. Lazy loading breaks it. So this was the real use case. I run Unify stuff at the house. Hopefully nobody's going to try to break into that and hack it, although I don't know. But it's all pretty much Unify at the house. But I want to know, because of what I just said, when new firmware comes out, because I want to make sure I'm on the latest stuff. So if you go to the website that has the unified software releases, the community website, renders fine in a browser. But if you use wget or curl, you just get the title. You just get the top part because of lazy loading. Basically, it allows you to not use all your traffic sending stuff to devices. As you scroll, that's when it starts to populate. So every website uses this because we all death scroll now. So they know, just show you the first 5, and then you'll keep going, and it'll show you 5 more, and then keep going, I'll show you 5 more. So lazy loading is a problem for this. It breaks URL watch. And then also me, like, I've done a bunch of different programming languages, but never like been an expert in any of them. So I have to go back and relearn, how do I do this in Python, which means I go to Stack Exchange and ask a question, and I copy the code, and then we get what we get. So I already have another set of scripts that does some checking for changes. So I just want to mimic that. I just want to know when something changes. That's what I want to know. Grab the text, do a diff, send me an email. Here's some new firmware that's available. I run it once a day. So here was the code, and again, you're going to get this, so you don't need to take a screenshot, but this is where the magic is. So the first part, we're using Beautiful Soup and Selenium. Fantastic to work with, super easy. You can script, basically an entire experience that you want from left to right, from I'm just going to Bank of America to I'm trying to do online account enrollment, and maybe even get all the way through. You can script it. I need Selenium as a WebDriver. I'm using Firefox because Chrome was broken. It was a well-known issue that happened. I don't know if it's fixed. I'm lazy to try to change it. We're saying it's a headless, and then we go to the website. Now here's the magic. Like these 2 lines, this, and what I'm gonna show you next. So I wanna get what the height is right now. What's the height of the web page that I've just rendered? And then I'm gonna pause, and I'm gonna scroll. I'm gonna scroll, and then pause. And is it the same? Is the new height the same as the last height? Oh, that means that I've reached the end. I'm at the bottom. Is it not? Go back up. Scroll some more. I want the entire web page. And then I pull it down. Also driver forks, so you really have to quit that. Otherwise, you're going to have a problem that I discovered wires all my memory. And then I just, down at the bottom, pull all this stuff out and dump it into a file. Super easy, but now, first of all, it solves 2 things for me. One, I don't have to remember what was on there the last time I went there. And 2, I don't have to remember to go there at all. Cron job schedules it for me. So the pros, simple, low compute costs. I put Python as a pro. Somebody might not like that. I put it as a pro because Python works pretty much everywhere, but anybody who works with Python a lot knows that you can get a bunch of weird package conflicts and all kinds of garbage that you may need to set up virtual environments for each one of your things, which I had to do, and it's kind of weird. Selenium and Beautiful Soup are super easy to use, like really, really easy to use. And there's actually a video that I put into, so you guys know like Free Code Camp? I love those guys. Free Code Camp, you can find hours of stuff. It's all for free on YouTube. You want to learn how to write Go? Good, there's like an 8-hour course for free on YouTube. There's a 4.5-hour course on writing web bots using, I think, Selenium and Beautiful Soup. Link to it. So by the end of that thing, y'all are all going to be pros and making MasterCard mad at you too, probably. Cons, look, I told you about my Python laziness. So I know there's a way that I can send emails from Python. I know there's a way I can do diffs. I know there's a way I can use a database or something. Took too long, couldn't be bothered. So I wrote a shell script around it, which you'll get a link to as well, to sort of execute the stuff for me. It's not maybe slower. For complex stuff, it is definitely slower than Go. Go is going to be way faster. The buddy I talked about earlier that does the experience hunting, he writes all his stuff in Go. So if you have complex operations, yes, Go is the way to go. Okay. Python, Selenium, and Beautiful Soup. These tools can work happily. They can also frustrate you because you have, a weird Chrome thing that doesn't work, or there's a weird driver that is not present in this version, and you have to downgrade to get whatever driver it is to get things to work for you. I already mentioned the headless Chrome, but switching to Firefox saved the day for me, so that was fine. Okay, so in summary, I have a few minutes for questions. We talked about Dottie learned that there's good and there's bad bots. And when I say good, it's in quotes, right? There's ones that we would say, I'm okay with this working and interacting with me, and then there's ones that are like, absolutely not. Nope, not gonna do that. So good and bad bots. But as a defender, you need to be able to understand both of those things because you have to explain it to management in a way that they make the correct decision that's right for the business. And the last one is we have to triage and we have to treat and, of course, be merry at the end. But you have to understand how to detect. You have to be really good at the detection. And then you take your business logic that you learned from the suits and you put it into whatever thing you're going to put it into so that the outcome on the other side matches what the suits told you to do. Are we sending them on a teapot? Are we just allowing them to go through because we don't care, but we're just kind of watching it and monitoring it? Whatever that answer is. Okay. So there's the QR code. I'll just leave that up there. But that has the resource pack, and the resource pack has all the slides you saw today. It has a whole write-up of a bunch of things you can do, instructions on how you can start writing your own stuff, links to code, all kinds of stuff. Is it working? Please tell me it's working. Okay, all right. It's loading? Oh yeah, see all you guys are now overwhelming my website, so that's fine. Oh sure, yeah, keep going, it's fine. They don't charge me for that, so. All right, so with that, are there any questions, anything we talked about today? Anybody who's brave enough to throw their hand up and ask? Yes. Okay, so the question was, how do you convince the higher-ups to allow/trust those bots if they're really against them? Like you've done the triage, you've looked and said they're really harmless, they're not doing anything, but they're like, I don't want any of this stuff, I only want humans on my website. How do you convince them that it's okay? Is that? Oh, to use internally. Oh, that's two different questions. So the internal one is super easy. You just show them the ROI. You basically say, look, you have one person that you're paying for to do these 27 steps. Now I have a web robot that can do that for them. So I've done two things. I've now allowed to scale. So yes, there's a cost to doing this, but you can allow it to scale. And I've reduced variability. So that's one of the biggest problems we have with testing is that when somebody skips step 7 and goes straight to step 8, and step 7 was the one that showed the problem that they needed to fix, so we reduced that variability. So that's a business case to do that. For automation, anything like that, I always look at it as a business case. If you allow me to do this, that's gonna allow me to scale my job or get more value back. On the other side of the equation, if you have people, for example, like let's say in financial services, they're like, bots are bad, and you're like, look, if you don't allow Mint to connect in, people are gonna go to banks that do allow Mint to connect in. And it may not be all of them, but it will be some of them. So if you're cool with, losing those deposits, then fine. But we can, through a nice strategy, allow this activity to occur where it doesn't affect the business and has minimal cost to like the ongoing operations. Is that good? Okay. Yes. Yep. Question was, why do we still see so much reCAPTCHA when there's other ways? It's because it's easy and free in most cases. That's why. I think it's terrible. Like the one service I put it on, I couldn't get the transparent one to work. So if you wanted to create an account on this website, you did have to select all the dogs and bicycles and traffic lights. It's a terrible user experience, 100%. I love that, yeah. There are some of those pictures that are a little ambiguous, right? Select a bus, and the big RV comes up, and I'm like, that kind of looks like a bus to me, man. I don't know, that Winnebago is kind of bus-like. So, yeah, I think that's the thing. These technologies to do this effectively, they do cost money. For us at the bank, we used F5, we used Shape. It wasn't an option for us to use CAPTCHA because of that very reason, and we didn't want, well, first of all, I don't know if any other banks use CAPTCHA. So if we were gonna use it, that was gonna be a regulatory issue. And we're like, nope. But other banks do use Shape. So that was another fun experience of working at a bank. The first question when a vendor comes in, you ask them is, what other banks are you doing this for? And if it's not Chase, Bank of America, Citi, you're out. Sorry, you gotta be doing it for one of them. Other questions? Okay, thanks everybody. I'll be up here if you wanna chat or ask any other questions, and the QR code should be working. Everybody was able to get to the stuff? Yeah, okay, cool. All right, thanks.